And once again, ciao guys, it's your boy M.K.S here back in another video. I'm live on Facebook and YouTube, as usual. Thankful for this opportunity. But anywho, today I want to talk about Celtic, and I planned to do this last week, but I sort of procrastinated and dilly-dallied, if you like. So by the time I just couldn't make any decisions, and I heard it in a song once. Life is so brief and time is a thief when you're undecided. When you're blinded, sorry. That's in a Rod Stewart song. But anyway, who is a Celtic supporter as well. But yeah, I'd love to help Celtic to be as successful as possible, to support Celtic to be as successful as possible. And if you see my other videos, you'll know by now, I'm sure, that I have these patterns. I use alliterations and things like that. A bit too obsessed with alliterations, but I think of Sunday as like it starts with SU, so I think of like support, success, and that kind of thing. So I'd love to support Celtic to be as successful as possible, even more successful than they are, and to continue with that success, hopefully avoiding complacency and continuing to improve, continue to improve continuously. I'm hoping Motherwell and our friends the Hibs, who also have an Irish connection, can do us a favour today. Hopefully Hibs can beat their biggest rivals. I'm sure they'll want to do that and help to stop them winning the league, hopefully. So they'll win. I'd love to see Hibs winning like 4-0 or something like that, maybe 4-2. That'd be great. But if they're, I don't know why the score 4-2 came in my mind, but 4-0 would be even better. That would help Celtic to pretty much be joint top with them, even on goal difference, that kind of thing. So I'd love to see Hibs score plenty of goals. People talking about Celtic winning like 7-0 yesterday, and said we'd be top of the league if we win like 7-0, even on goal difference. But I felt Celtic were good in spells, but I felt certainly the end product wasn't always that great. And I think I know it took a mistake for the opposition to score. Even the shot was quite weak. I'm surprised the goalkeeper's positioning was a bit. I think they got their goalkeeper, Falkirk's goalkeeper, was only about 16, bless him. So it felt a bit bad to beat him. But yes, all is fair and nothing more, as they say. And we've got to get those points, and we needed lots of goals. We did win 3-1, which is most important. We got the 3 points, but it could go all the way to goal difference, so that could make a massive difference. But yeah, sadly it wasn't 7-0. In fact, I got a bit nervous, especially I was nervous throughout the whole game until we got 2-0 up, and then I started relaxing a little bit, especially when we scored just before half time. But then I went to watch the game with my dad, as I say. I just forgot to say that bit, but I know I mentioned that yesterday. But yeah, I think it was a nervy game, I think. But they made a mistake, and then we got a goal from Maida, and I thought he was really good. He got 2, and I think he was probably a bit unlucky not to get a hat trick, but he closed everything down and all that kind of thing. Some people say he threw the dummy out the pram or whatever the saying is, because when he didn't get his move. But anyway, these are pointers number 1 to 10 as per usual. So here goes. So number 1, I'd love to see what supporters could do to help Celtic to be as successful as possible. I often get wary when people get complacent and say we've already won the league, or we're going to win these games before they even start, or whatever. I think it's got to be continual improvement, otherwise we stand still if we don't continue to improve and put the effort into improvement upon the game. As I say, yesterday I think Celtic's passing was still a bit poor at times. We gave away the ball. I think our opposition even gave us chances, gave away the ball, and things like that. In the midfield, I think we could have been a bit faster with our passing, a bit stronger on more of the 50-50 balls, a little bit more. But at times, I think it was really good. I still think that in the final third, we need to have a bit more ruthlessness at times. Kieran Tierney took his goal really well. It was like a striker's goal, I think. But yeah, there were times also, like in terms of being able to play the ball through. Like sometimes players could have a shot, they didn't take on a shot, and sometimes they could play the ball through more. People say about Sebastian Tanuki, the Tunisian player, who He I think tries to be a bit fancy and tries to do a bit too much rather than play the ball in quicker or sometimes have a shot. There are a couple of times where players could have had a shot earlier and things like that. But yeah, Celtic does have a lot of success, thankfully, already, but I hope it can continue with that success. Point number two, I think I normally talk about, I normally talk about learning and things like that. Learning, I'm not the best at learning and picking things up, but I think, as I mentioned, like learning from other clubs, learning from other clubs, and I think I normally say Real Madrid are the benchmark to learn from, and I love this Celtic to learn from other clubs. Like, what do other clubs do well or not so well? What could Celtic learn from other clubs, especially like Real Madrid, Barcelona, and other teams? Although sometimes we try to play too much like Barcelona, where um, perhaps that's not the British way to play, or whatever. Not, and perhaps we don't have the quality Barcelona had. So perhaps we need to mix up with a bit of a different game. Like, for instance, I'm not sure the goalkeeper did it. His distribution wasn't too great, but I'm not sure that the goalkeeper did it too much yesterday. But a lot of times they'll play out from the back, and I think there's a time to do that. But sometimes to go long and mix it up, I think is important. So mixing up. But as I say, how can Celtic continue to improve and learn from other clubs and continue to learn and develop and perhaps do what's best for the club in terms of, like, as I say, perhaps we can't copy Barcelona too much because of the quality and that kind of thing, or lack thereof in our case, compared to them, of course. Um, as great as they can be, as great as they are many times. There's something wrong with, I've got to pronounce this right, there's something wrong with the clock in the corner of my laptop. So that's stuck on 11 minutes. 11 o'clock, I wish it still was 11 o'clock, but it's almost quarter to 12. But I don't know what's happened with that clock, so I hope it's not too much of a technical issue with my laptop, although it is running a bit slow. I'm hoping it will last for as long as possible. But moving on to number three, I'd love to see how the club can get as many sponsors and investors as possible to sponsor, as I normally talk about, like spaces and places for sport, in this case soccer, spaces and places for soccer, if you like, football or whatever you've got it to say. Again, going on my silly alliterations, as it's Sunday. So yeah, that's why I'm focusing on, like, support to achieve success. I kind of both start with SU, just like Sunday. But yeah, I suppose when it comes to the youth, it doesn't bother me as much as it does with Italian soccer or football or whatever you call it, because I support Italian football more generally, Italian soccer more generally, and including the national team. That includes the national team. So with Celtic, I'm not so fussed about the youth development. Like, even if Celtic got wealthy owners and just bought loads of great players from around the world, I'd be happy with that, because I don't really support the Scottish national team so much. Certainly not anywhere near as much as I support Italy. So the youth doesn't really bother me quite as much. But maybe having the funding to have those academies is going to please many Celtic sports, especially those who are sports of the national team as well. Although many of those academy players could be from overseas as well. But I wonder if it could mean, like, saving players. I don't know which one's better value for money, because sometimes you can buy a player. Scottish football still goes into the bargain basement compared to the EPL, which can spend like 100 million or more on a player sometimes. Where Scotland still spends like 10, 11 million or whatever on a player at the most, pretty much. That's pushing out the bank or whatever the saying is. Putting out all stops. But I do sometimes wonder. I do think it would be cool if Celtic works with the local and regional politicians and councillors and whatnot, or even national in Scotland, like politicians and whatnot, to fund like academies and all that kind of thing, which could keep people out of trouble. But I think, like, if you spend 100 million on an academy, I suppose it does cost money to run it annually, like, to keep lights on and things like that, which I am a bit naive to. Those costs, I'm aware of those costs. I don't know what's about those costs until recently. I didn't really think about that, because I was thinking, like, you could develop like 10 or even 20 or even more good young players, maybe 30, 40 or even 100, or whatever, young players, and spend the similar amounts of money than buying one great player when you factor in their wages as well, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I wonder what you think. I'll ask, especially any Celtic sports out there, which do you think is better value for money? Developing good young players in the academies, which hopefully can play for the club and then be sold on, can play for the club for the next 5 to 10 years and then be sold on or whatever, or buying great players. I wonder which one you think is better. Yeah, I'd still love to see the club get spaces and places for soccer, or places and spaces for sport, whatever you call it. Number 4, another really mad ambition of mine, I guess. I have some mad ideas, but I mentioned with Italian soccer and Celtic, I suppose similar ideas, are pretty much the same ideas for both, I guess, give or take. So yeah, probably not completely literally, but about probably 90% of the ideas, or at least 75%, are the same that I have for Italian soccer as I do with Celtic. But I I'd love to see like a disinvestment, a divestment or disinvestment, or whatever you call it, from wars and the weapons trade, that kind of thing, from militarism and that kind of thing, towards Italian football and Celtic. I say peace through football and building bridges, but also as an Italian fan and a Celtic fan, I'd love to see it invested there. If I'm really dreaming, this is a really mad dream, I know, even by my standards perhaps, um, probably a pipe dream, more likely. I gotta say, I like to keep hope alive, but it'd be amazing if it happened. But of course, um, I'd love to see Celtic get perhaps the same sort of investment that's spent on wars and the weapons trade and that kind of thing. If I'm really dreaming, probably even more than that, because I don't want to. Well, if you've seen my videos before, or heard my videos before, you probably know I'm very anti-war. Um, Unlikely, obviously, to spend like worldwide, people spend like trillions on wars, that kind of thing, weapons of mass destruction. But I'd love to see that go into Celtic. But as I say, very unlikely. I can't even believe I'm saying that. It's very unlikely. It's pretty much impossible, but it would be amazing if it happened. If I'm really dreaming, I try and be as honest as possible about my mad dreams if I can. But anyway, moving on. Number 5. As I say, I'd love to know from supporters out there, what do you think can be done to help Celtic become world class? Maybe the supporters could buy shares in the club as much as possible. I know some already do, but maybe more supporters could be encouraged to buy shares, even if it's like a small amount. Maybe every little helps to make the club have as much investment as possible, which could help with that goal, those aims and objectives of helping the club to be as successful as possible with that funding, which is required to help clubs. Like if you look at clubs like Leicester, they're struggling financially, and finances are really important. I knew that even before, but I've known that for a long time. But yeah, even having small shares or investing into sponsoring and so forth, to a club, being as open as possible for these sponsors, encouraging sponsors to sponsor the club, and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'd love to know from Celtic supporters out there what your goals are. I know many Celtic supporters have different goals on. Excuse me. The Celtic supporters have different goals on, like, for instance, some would not be very happy to have wealthy investors from Africa, Asia, Arab investors, or whatever. Whereas I'm sure some would be happy as long as it, as long as they invest in them. I think any investors that come in should give their 5 to 10 year plans. Often I think of 5 to 10 year plans, but I do struggle to set my own 5 to 10 year plans. But I think they should come in and say, within the next year, we'll, starting from like the next year, we will invest this much in the academies and supporters experiences, marketing, promote the club around the world across Africa and Asia. Like, for instance, if we got an investor from Nigeria, they could promote the club. It would raise the profile even more in places like Nigeria. If we got investors from India, China, same sort of thing. Yeah, that was a point I was going to say. I completely forgot, which is very annoying. But yeah, I'd love to know from the supporters what the goals are. I guess the main thing is like winning the league, winning domestic cups. But I mean, I have to mention, a lot of the supporters want to see Celtic do well in Europe. in Europe, but at the same time, I don't know why I put Europe is really wrong. Anyway, they want to see Celtic do well in Europe, but at the same time, don't want that investment, wealthy owners. But I don't know how that's possible. All the teams that compete in Europe have so much investment, but I do think to me, unless you can actually go to try and win the trophies, I care more about the trophies. And I know I share my personal goals, but it'd be great, as I say, to hear from other Celtic supporters about what their goals are for the club and maybe ideas on how to promote the club around the world. And moving on, number 6, I'd love for the club to have a partnership with Italian soccer. I know I mentioned that quite a lot. Number 7, I wonder if Celtic could be the flag carrier, so to speak, for Celts around the world. So the Celtic countries, as I call them, and to represent Celts all around the world. Also, I love for the club to have as many 7-a-side pitches as possible. I have to pronounce that word right. Especially for the youth and that kind of thing. So I think that's really important as well. Like again, I'd be happy to see loads of money spent on buying better players, but it would be good, I think, to have a bit of youth development. It doesn't affect me as much as with the Italian teams because I want to see the national team do well. And maybe the club could have good young players from Italy as well as elsewhere, of course. More Italian players, but I'd love to know on that note who Celts, i.e. Celtic sports, I normally say Celts, I mean Celtic sports, who Celtic sports want to see the club sign. And again, any views on Celtic sports have number 8, as I say, being a flag carrier for the 8 Celtic countries. I like to use alliterations. People call them the Celtic nations, but I say Celtic countries like Ireland, Scotland, I think Cornwall, some places like Brittany and France, and one or two other places, obviously, or even Gaelic, like Welsh or whatever. So building those connections and having sports clubs all around the world, all 4 corners of the world, and that kind of thing. And the passion of the sports, how can that help the club? I know there's talks, for instance, of talking about having shares in the club. There's some who want to see a supporter takeover of the club. Although there's talk that people say that obviously, even if the supporters want to take over the club, it would require huge amounts of investment, huge sums of money. I think of another word that was with SU, but huge sums of money just to buy the club. And then it's like when they're talking about Newcastle before the PIF took over, and Rio Ferdinand said, "Why don't Newcastle supporters buy out the club if they're not happy?" And one or two Newcastle supporters were saying, in fact, I heard on, I think it was the kickoff or something. They were talking about the football show, soccer show, whatever you call it, on YouTube. They were talking about whether, like I said, if you buy the club, you still got to obviously pay the players, not just buy them, but you've got to pay the wages and all the other costs, like unforeseen costs, just like any other business. Like in this case, keeping the lighting on. I suppose most businesses, any business that has a premises would obviously have to keep the lighting on and that kind of thing. So there are huge costs involved. But maybe even if the supporters don't own the club outright, if the supporters can't buy out the club, the supporters could still own part of the club, like even if it's 10%, and therefore hopefully have some sort of say on the running of the club. So even if it's not like in Germany where the supporters own the clubs, or at least half the club, or whatever, it could still be, supporters could still find ways to benefit the club, or even some put the money where the mouth is. Those who are passionate enough, like me, if I had lots of money, I would support Italian soccer and Celtic financially, as I mentioned before. But even as a supporters investing into sponsoring and even donating to the club, perhaps some amounts of money, donating to the club for a ground. I'd love, maybe I'm being naive here as usual, but I'd love for the club to have its own, just like I love for, as I say, Italian soccer, pretty much the same ideas, as I say. I'd love for the club to have its own bank account where fans, the supporters knew that whatever money they put in there, at least a percentage of that is going to go towards not just wages or just the wealthy, not just the wealthy owners keeping the money, but at least whatever percentage is going to go in to buying better players and just generally benefit the club, again, the academies and things like that. but yeah, seeing how the supporters' passion can attract more investment and sponsorship and just generally benefit the club. How can the supporters do their best to benefit the club? I suppose most supporters have hooligans and that kind of thing, but being on their best behaviour, making sure the club doesn't get fines and so forth, doesn't get into general trouble or bad reputation or whatever as much as possible, like keeping a positive um, reputation. Um, so yeah, being good representatives of the club, students of the club, if you like. So uh, also, like talking about all the charitable work they do, and that kind of thing. Perhaps it could be better marketing, like the club's support for Palestine could be something that could get more supporters. Anyone who supports Palestine or whatever, for instance, I try and be neutral, but as a club, it supports Palestine, so I thought I'd give that example. And the charitable work the club does around the world. Also using, I just remember this one, like using the Rangers, as I call them, the Rankers, using their hate, for instance, their hate for Catholics to drum up support, like all the Catholics support Celtic, like that. So yeah, using the Rankers' hate against them, I guess, to benefit our club. Although I don't want to hate anyone or anything, if I can help it. If I can make a deal with my maker, I don't want to hate anyone or anything. Also, I'd say the club talking about. I know the club already talks about anti-racism, but again, maybe the supporters could talk about that more as well. Um, it's campaign against racism and that kind of thing. Number 9, I'd say seeing what the supporters could do and how the supporters clubs could be promoted all around the world, all four corners of the world. And I think of like poets, artists, and writers united for. So there could be like a group like Poets United for Celtic, and they write poetry about Celtic and what the club means to them. Um, like a love letter to the club and that kind of thing, and write about history and whatever through poetry. Also artists like choreography and all that kind of thing. I know that kind of already exists, but drawing pictures for the club and like strategies on paper and things like that. Drawing like a football pitch and then like the different strategies the club could use, different tactics basically. And also obviously writers for Celtic, I'll say. So writing up again what the club means to the supporters and like um, writings on Celtic, writings about its history, facts about the club, um, reasons to support the club, and let's say a love letter to the club, if you like, and that kind of thing. And also, I think like architects for Celtic, designers for Celtic, business people for Celtic, and all that kind of thing. So there can be different Facebook pages and that kind of thing, sports clubs. And again, having sports clubs all around the world. I think that comes in at point number 9. And number 10, again, I'd love to know from Celtic sports how important the youth is for. Well, I'd say I'd love to see 7-a-side pitches and different youth facilities to help younger players to develop their game. And on that note,